Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 323 of the All Dolphins podcast on this Saturday, August 24th, 2024, on what has turned out to be a hellaciously good weekend for one Tyreek Hill. Friday night named the number one player on the NFL Network's top 100 list. Saturday getting a restructured contract, not an extension, it's a restructured contract, but a new contract nonetheless that puts a whole lot more money in his pocket, and we're going to be talking about all of that and then some, including a new offensive lineman, what we saw at practice, Tua's interesting comments, not about Taylor Swift, but about Odell Beckham Jr., and we're going to do all that with our regular co-host, my buddy Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. How are you, Perk? Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a minute, right? Literally, probably. Hey, look, it's time to go, right? Tua under contract, Waddle under contract, Tyreek under contract. Let's do it, baby. Let's do it. Let's go.
Okay, and we're gonna talk about that in those big general terms as well. I like that idea. Okay, some of you will be very, very happy. We're going to be done with the year recap for the history lesson because we're at episode 323, and 2023 was last year. I think we all know what happened. However, I do want to still want to do some history lesson with a different twist this time, and we're going to make it topical. And I'm going to revisit very quickly with your input as well. But I'm the old guy here, as proven by the white hair. You have some, you don't have nearly as many as me. The best trades in Dolphin history and where Tyreek Hill's trade would go in there. And I'm going to throw out some of the really, really good trades the Dolphins have made, starting with Larry Little, obtained from the San Diego Chargers in 1969 for a cornerback by the name of Mac Lamb, who never amounted to much in the NFL. He may have played 2 years after he left the Dolphins, something along those lines. And Larry Little only became one of the best guards in NFL history, made it to the Hall of Fame. That was an all-timer. Before that, the Dolphins traded three players, A.J. Bramlett, Kim Hammond, I want to say, and a fifth-round pick. Sorry, it was two players in a pick, to the Boston Patriots for Nick Bonacani, who had been an all-AFL player who became the heart and soul of the no-name defense. There were a lot of really good players on that defense. Bonacani was one of those. He was an extremely cerebral linebacker, shortish, kind of like Zach Thomas before Zach Thomas. Also a member of the Hall of Fame, went on to a great career with HBO Sports, unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And then there's a Tyreek trade. And Perk, while you talk, I'm going to go look at the previous story I wrote about blockbuster trades, which was Tyreek Hill from the Kansas City Chiefs for 5 draft picks. It was 1-1. Correct me if I'm wrong here because I keep losing. It's 1-1, a 2, 2 4s, and a 6, something along those lines. Yeah. We all probably should say also that part of the compensation, not necessarily to Kansas City, but it was also the willingness to shell out big money contract-wise for Tyreek. And before I ask Perk for his thoughts on those, let me mention, if some of you might suggest, well, what about the Don Shula getting traded from Baltimore? That wasn't technically a trade. It was basically the Dolphins signed Don Shula while he was – there was some confusion as to whether technically they were allowed to sign him or whether he was still under contract with the Baltimore Colts. The Colts made us think about it, and the NFL commissioner, I want to say it was Pete Rozelle at the time, told the Dolphins, well, you're going to make nice with the Colts. You're going to throw him a first-round pick as compensation. Yep. That obviously worked out as a great transaction for the Dolphins, but technically to call it a trade might be a stretch. So thoughts on any of this as I look at my previous story, Perk?
Oh, the easy thought on that is Shula Super Bowl champ, even though that wasn't a trade. You're exactly right. Larry Little Super Bowl champ, Nick Bonacani Super Bowl champ, Tyreek, it's your turn. Look, the Tyreek trade was a great trade because, once again, as I've said, it fits what the Dolphins do perfectly, right? That's why Mike McDaniel, Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle all fit perfectly. I know we have not seen a playoff victory yet, but they are a perfect blend of player, coach, and system. And that's what you need at any level to that. That's like your first step to being successful is you've got to have a successful union among those three. And that's what Tyreek and Tua and Jalen Waddle and Mike McDaniel represent. So all of those acquisitions are A1 acquisitions because of who they are with and what system they're playing in. They've just got to win now.
Okay, and as I'm looking at this story, it's amazing. I'm actually looking at the screen with the story I had done on blockbuster trades by the Dolphins. Another one that needs to be mentioned is a 1970 trade, and I apologize for going so far back, but hey, it's a history lesson. The Dolphins acquired Paul Warfield from the Cleveland Browns for a first-round pick, and Paul Warfield was one of the greatest wide receivers you will ever see, and he added an element to the Dolphin offense of the 1970s, which was focused on the running game, but that guy could go over the top, and his yards per reception was absolutely crazy. So we'll dive back. I mean, I hope this history lesson was not too painful for those who don't like the history lesson, but this is, again, now the Dolphins, what they've done, as I mentioned, it's a restructure, not an extension. What the Dolphins have done, Tyreek Hill had 3 years left on his contract. All of the guaranteed money was up after the 2024 season. Now they've guaranteed $65 million through the 2026 season in terms of guaranteed money. It's the highest ever for a contract without additional years. It's also the highest now for a wide receiver. In terms of annual average, it stays the same for Tyreek. He's at $30 million on the nose for the next 3 years. And that puts him fourth in the NFL behind Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. But I think Tyreek getting all that money guaranteed is a pretty good compromise where he will say, okay, fine, I'm number 4, I'm not number 1, even though I'm the number 1 player in the NFL. And if you saw his reaction on the video Friday night, that obviously meant a lot to the dude. But I think that's a good trade-off for Tyreek Hill. It's a good trade-off for the Dolphins. We have to see exactly. I'm not quite sure what that's going to mean cap-wise. Right. But I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that there's going to be an awful lot of the cap space tied into Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle. And as we mentioned before, the Dolphins have basically made it. That's their big 3. Mm-hmm. That's the nucleus of their team. That's what they want to move forward with as the guys who are going to make this team go. And based on the results of the first 2 seasons as a trio, there's some validity there. The question again is, can that group with the surrounding pieces get to the next step? But it's difficult to fault the approach. And I had written a column before to assign his contract extension that if the Dolphins were going to go ahead and give him an extension, which was the expectation all along, that it made no sense for them not to also lock up Tyreek as well, because, the whole thing works together as a package.
This thing now is about everybody else, right, Poop? It's about Chubb and Phillips and how you're going to mount a pass rush. It's about Jalen Ramsey and how you're going to defend all these electric receivers in the NFL. Raheem Mostert and OBJ and Jonnu Smith. What do you have in addition to your big 3 offensively? You've got your big 3 offensively, and they do their job very well. Everybody else now has to be fit into their slots, and they've got to do their jobs. To me, that's what this is all about now, getting these other guys to do their jobs. And look, I shouldn't phrase it like that, because I have stressed that, Mike McDaniel, Tua, and Tyreek have to come through in the games against the playoff teams, against the biggest games, at the biggest moments, at the biggest time of the year. So Mike McDaniel, you can't go away from the run. You can't take a long time to get the play in. Tua, you can't be throwing those late game interceptions. Tyreek, you can't be dropping those balls. You are the big 3. With all due respect to Jalen Waddle, you are the big 3. I think Jalen has probably been the most consistent in the big games. I've got to go back and look that up. Apologize for just saying that and not knowing. But that to me, those guys they've got to win the big games. The other guys get us to those big games, get us to those big moments. And these guys, you take it across the goal line. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and this is where I'm going to take a glass half full approach here, or view of the whole situation. And I know some of you out there. And by the way, this is where again I'm remiss because I'm a bad host and I'm still semi new at this. I always forget. Please like, subscribe, and share the All Dolphins podcast. We're here every day from now on until February, barring certain exceptions. We will be here tomorrow, even though the Dolphins will have a day off. So tell your friends, everybody. Anyway, and I know it will surprise some of you who are regular viewers or those who are regular detractors of my views, I'm going to take the glass half full approach here, in that with those three locked up, based on what we've seen in the first 2 years, I think we can have a certain level of confidence that the Dolphins will put themselves in the position to accomplish big things once December arrives. And who was it? Bum Phillips' famous quote is like, one day I'm going to knock on the door, second day I'm going to bang on the door, and then one day I'm going to burst the damn thing open. And maybe that's what's going to happen with the Dolphins. I know in the history in the NFL, I don't think it's quite as prevalent as it is in basketball. You're a big NBA guy. Mm-hmm. In the NBA, it always seems like teams have to reach a certain level and then they lose at a certain level before they can break through. And maybe that applies to the Dolphins, where, again, they've been there the past couple of years. They were there in position to strike and accomplish big things. It didn't pan out for whatever reason you want to say. I mean, there was a multitude of reasons. And maybe, again, I think all of us probably would be very surprised if the Dolphins, again, were not in a position to accomplish good things once December rolls around in 2024.
I'm giving them right now 10 wins, and I'm saying 11 wins is probable. 12 wins, let's see. I don't know what it's going to take to get a home playoff game, but I am penciling them in for 10 wins. And let's see what they get above that. They should be in the playoffs. I mean, right? Like 85%, there's injuries and there's other teams that could pop up and do stuff that's unexpected. But yeah, I would say 85%. I would bet that they're going to win 10 games and get in the playoffs, win at least 10 games and get in the playoffs. But, really, to me, I want to see this team do things that we have not seen them do previously. I have said, and I do believe, that this is going to be the year that they get the offense together, meaning that they get the tight end incorporated, they get the slot receiver incorporated, they get a short yardage package going. I'm not saying it's going to be as certain as the tush push, but I think Mike McDaniel realizes now, that the way I've been doing it, it's not going to work, that these teams are just on it. And so I've got to diversify. I've got to expand. And I do really believe that we're going to see the best of the Dolphins offense this year, meaning it's going to be more than Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle, that it's going to be diverse and it's going to be a lot harder to predict this season.
And here's the interesting thing, though, because we say this and we're talking about all the things the Dolphins need to do better on offense. This was Utah. There was, by the way, Chris Perkins, not me who was saying that, but you were talking about all those things. And this is where somebody could say, well, they were number one in the NFL in total offense. They were number one in the NFL on yards per rushing attempt. Mm-hmm. And this is where, again, let's look beyond the numbers. It's not like this was a perfect offense that does not have room to grow. Yes, it does have room to grow. A couple of other Tyreek notes. A couple of Tyreek notes. On the number one, on the top 100 list, him being number one. I know there's a lot of people are up in arms like this, and like, oh, how can it not be Patrick Mahomes? Well, the timing of the vote has something to do with it. Mm-hmm. As we said on this podcast before, the votes are done in December of 2023, at a time when the Dolphins are still in contention for the number one seed in the AFC, at a time when the Chiefs are not going to have the top seed. They're going to have to go on the road for a couple of their playoff games, at a time when the offense did not have necessarily a great year. Patrick Mahomes did not have a Patrick Mahomes year. So when you see all the outrage, it kind of boggles my mind why it's not accompanied with a caveat that this was not done in the offseason. Had the voting been done in the offseason, yeah, I'm going to guess Patrick Mahomes would be number one. And I think if you ask anybody legitimately, he's probably the best player, but Tyreek Hill being number one, I'm sorry, but that's not out of place. If you watch the dude, and not only it's a couple of things, forget the production, beyond the production, watch how insanely open he gets on a lot of his receptions, because the DBs are so scared of his speed. Where you see the play where I don't know how many times I've seen where he's sprinting down the field really fast, the DB all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, turns around, starts sprinting down the field himself, and then Tyreek puts on the brakes, goes outside, and he's got a 15-yard cushion. And that happens. And who's the guy with the Dolphins look for at crunch time? It's Tyreek. And the other thing, too, is if you don't think Tyreek opens up the field for the rest of the offense, I don't know what to tell you. So his impact goes way beyond his stats, and there's nobody else like him. So him at number one is, to me, massively not out of place. I know there was, and I'm not going to throw him under the bus because he's a buddy of mine. He appeared on the All Dolphins podcast, but there's a certain Kansas City Chiefs reporter who was like mocking Tyreek being number one because L'Jarius Sneed kind of like put him on his butt a couple of times in the playoff game at KC. I mean, wow, talk about selective manipulation of the facts here. Come on. So from that standpoint, I do want to address one other thing too about that top 100. You guys may have seen Raheem Mostert being not happy about where he was ranked because he was 60th overall. Well, a couple of things on that. He was fourth among Dolphin players behind Tyreek, Jalen Ramsey, and Tua, ahead of Teron Armstead, Jalen Waddle, Jordan Poyer, and Bradley Chubb, who were the other ones on the Dolphins list. Okay, number one, Raheem being fourth on the Dolphins, I think he should be very happy with that. I'm not sure I'd put him in number 4 myself. And then number 2, very important, if he felt disrespected, this was a running back thing that disrespected. It wasn't just Raheem, because Raheem Mostert was number 3 among all NFL running backs on that list. It was Christian McCaffrey at 3, and Derrick Henry was at 49. Then Raheem. So there's that. Perk?
And Poop, to the viewers out there, I wanted to write about this process, this voting process, each of the last 2 years, but it takes place in December. 2 years ago in December, you remember the Dolphins have the 5-game losing streak. Nobody wants to read about how these guys vote on the top 100, a list that's coming out 2 months later. And the same thing this year when the Dolphins are going for the number 1 playoff seed. And you did have a bit of a slide, and Tyreek is injured, and Jalen Waddle is injured. And this is the time that, the NFL people come into the locker room and the players write down a top 10. They vote on a top 10. The players don't list 100 players. Right. They vote on a top 10, and the NFL compiles all the votes, and that's how you come up with the top 100. But again, when the Dolphins are fighting for their playoff lives and fighting for playoff seeding, and there's injuries and Teron Armstead, nobody wants to read about how you vote on the top 100. So the process is like Poop said, they're voting on this thing in December at a time when Chiefs receivers are dropping passes left and right, and you're wondering how are they going to go on the road and win a playoff game? Mahomes hasn't done that aside from the neutral site of the Super Bowl. But that's how the voting is done, and the NFL is not going to come out now and step by step meticulously explain the process, which I would like to do, but that's the process that it's done in December, and the players are and look, we've seen the NFL personnel coming up to the players and helping them with suggesting names. We've seen players joking with each other. Hey, you vote for me, I vote for you, and they're just joking. But there's it's not something that players sit down and really go through some kind of a book or get on their phone and look up the statistical leaders. It's just, who do I know? Who's good at my position? Who's popular? Here's 10 names. I'm going in the shower, going in the cold tub. I don't have more time for this. So don't be so caught up in this list.
But and here's the thing, though. The top 100 serves its purpose because it generates conversation.
Yes.
And every list does. I'll give you an example of a list that maybe generated some interest. When you start ranking the quarterbacks, people go nuts over those. Yep. Again, it's to generate interest, generate conversation. That's what it is. It's not an end all be all. Again, I think we probably, if you ask every player right now, I'm going to guess Patrick Mahomes probably would get into the top pick. But again, Tyreek was not necessarily crazy. And obviously it's a big source of pride if you wind up number 1. And watch that video again. As I said, we have a story on it on Miami Dolphins on SI at the URL under my name, si.com/NFL/Dolphins, with his reaction. I mean, to say he was psyched about it would be an understatement. Last thing about
let me say, I love the vote also. I know, look, I would vote Mahomes number 1. I would put Tyreek number 2, no lower than number 2, which means he would be number 1 or number 2. His value to the Dolphins is the best. He's more important to the Dolphins than any other player. And I did my most important players list, I think, back in February, and Tyreek was number one. The other thing is that Tyreek, I've always said this about the Dolphins offense, that it's about two things: Tyreek Hill and the threat of Tyreek Hill. And I think that there are players around the league that agree with that and understand that. And the vote kind of shows what players think Tyreek means to the Dolphins. I would say that. So, as far as the Mahomes being number one, okay, but Tyreek's importance to his team, and not that Mahomes' importance is any less to the Chiefs, but I think it's an acknowledgement of that as well as Tyreek's unique talents.
Yeah, I think it was Darius Slayton, wide receiver for the Giants, I believe, who was like kind of laughing, shaking his head of like, yeah, to me, and he's talking about like, I see teams covering him one-on-one in press with no safety help over the top, and I'm like shaking my head. And then they show a clip of the Giants doing just that. And what happened? Tyreek creates 5 yards of separation, boom, long touchdown. So anyway, and then this goes back to the contract. And Mike McDaniel was asked about Tyreek turned 30 in March 1st, I believe it was. And generally speaking, wide receivers will start to slow down. And he made a very good point. Like, Tyreek's an outlier. I mean, he is. There hasn't been somebody like him in the NFL, maybe ever. I mean, again, this cannot be overstated. The dude is freakish with his athleticism.
Yep.
Well, and this is why the Dolphins didn't add years to the contract. All they did is they guaranteed him, which pretty much he'll be here for the next 3 years. And I think, to me, that was a very good move.
A quick hand for Chris Greer. Good offseason. Well done, Chris Greer. And Brandon Shore.
Anybody else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. The other wide receiver part of the equation, who Park referenced earlier, is OBJ, who remains out. He's still on PUP. He's still doing some work, some running at practice on the field that's not being used by the actual practice. And Tua, who spoke to the media after practice on Saturday. By the way, Tua, the tone in his voice and is not only night and day from minicamp, it's also, I mean, he is, since he lost weight, I would almost say he's like not as large, but very much more in charge, if that makes any sense. I mean, there's an ease, if that's the right word, with which he's talking. Like, I mean, it's like a massive weight was lifted, and he is like, and by the way, too, I forgive you for dropping my recorder at the podium, and it's still working, so you don't have to buy me a new one. I was about to tell Tua, that thing costs $7,000. You're gonna have to replace it. Sorry,
he wouldn't care.
No, he could. Yeah, nowadays, or I could have said, "What's your signing bonus?" $30 million. Cost $30 million. Anyway, we digress. He talked about OBJ, and I found this very interesting. I actually wrote about it, that he didn't know what to expect of OBJ as a dude when the Dolphins signed him, because he thought, A-list celebrity, because OBJ is that, and is he going to be one of those guys who's going to be like, I'm in Miami because it's Miami and all that? And he basically said he loves the guy, has hung out with him quite a bit off the field. And that I would tell you, even though in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to mean 20 more receptions for OBJ, but actually it's a good thing, and it certainly can't hurt, and actually might even help in terms of the chemistry that they have on the field.
I was a little bit surprised that Tua said that, he had heard all this stuff about OBJ, because I would think at this level you would be a little bit more open-minded, because and the stuff that he heard.
No, hold on. I need to stop you here, because I think I'm not sure that's the right characterization. I don't think that Tua had made any prejudgments. I think he just said he wasn't sure.
Yeah. Here's what I'm getting to. I don't know what the stuff that he heard, whether it was from his agent or guys who had been teammates of OBJ or social media. And that's what I was getting to. I wonder, I would think that guys might be a little bit more open-minded, I guess I would say, but I don't know if it came from other players, then I could see Tua giving it a lot of credibility, the chirping, the stuff that he's heard or the opinions. But I just wonder where it came from, the stuff. Look, it's fine that he's got a different opinion of him now, but I always wonder that about players. It's at a certain point, I wonder why you're not more open-minded about other players.
Maybe the boat picture. Was Beckham part of the boat picture? The Giants were on a bye and they went down to the Bahamas, I think. There were several players on the boat and their season went south. Was he part of that?
I don't remember. I remember the picture. I don't remember. Remember. But whatever. Yeah, it just surprises me that that players kind of buy into that stuff sometimes. I would think that you would have learned to be open-minded, but we're all human, right? We're all human. But I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I didn't take it that way. Okay. There was some news.
Yes.
Talk about burying the lead here. But it was a roster move. It wasn't a terribly huge roster move, and we thought the Tyreek stuff would be more important. The Dolphins signed a veteran offensive lineman. I know that's going to make a lot of Dolphin fans happy. Not somebody who is high profile, I would say. They signed Sean Harlow, who has been in the NFL for 4 or 5 years. He originally came in as a 4th-round pick of the Atlanta Falcons. Bounced around 4 or 5 teams. His most extensive experience came with the Arizona Cardinals, for whom he played 32 games with 8 starts. Those are only 8 starts in the NFL. That was a few years back, 21 and 22. Last year, he split time with the Dallas Cowboys, 1 game, and the New York Giants, 7 games. It's not like the Dolphins have a bunch of guys locked into roster spots at guard. So if he comes in and shows something very quickly, who knows what the possibilities are. To make room on the roster, the Dolphins waived rookie free agent center Ireland Brown. Again, it doesn't hurt to bring in different guys like this, especially if to make room, you dump a guy who wasn't going to make the roster. Ireland Brown, rookie free agent. And again, as I'm going to say, repeat for every rookie free agent, when the rookie free agent makes a team, it's a bonus. So you should not be an expectation. So he was a very long shot. He had a couple of bad snaps in practice and in the shotgun formation earlier this week, where it's like, "Ooh, dude, you're going to be back the next day." And lo and behold, that's how it turned out. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thing. I think that their interior offensive line, their starting interior offensive line is on the roster. I think it's going to be Aaron Brewer, or I think they could be comfortable with Aaron Brewer at center, Liam Eichenberg at right guard, Robert Jones at left guard, Lester Cotton as a backup, and then whoever else you want to have in there. It's okay to go outside of the roster. I don't mind them. You always need to be looking, but Dolphins fans, don't be mad if you see that starting interior line September 8th against Jacksonville of Brewer, Eichenberg, and Robert Jones. Don't be mad. Don't think you're inadequate. Maybe there's an upgrade later in the season, but I really, really think that that's going to be good enough. Put it to you like this. If the Dolphins don't win a playoff game, it's not going to be because of the interior offensive line. I will guarantee you that. I will go on record as saying that. It's not going to be that big a deal.
Okay, can I ask one of the viewers, can you please type that in the comments so we have it as a reference point? August 3rd, 2024, Mr. Perkins is saying Dolphins will not lose a playoff game because of the interior offensive line. Okay.
Has that happened in Dolphins history? Have they ever lost a playoff game because of interior offensive line? Have they ever missed the playoffs because of interior offensive line? No.
Well, if your quarterback's getting harassed up the middle, it's not necessarily going to show up.
But that hasn't in the 7 and 9 Ryan Tannehill years. It was never interior offensive line's fault. You might have been below league average, but that's not why you missed the playoffs. It's probably not in the top 5 reasons. You didn't have a good running game. You didn't have a good enough passing game. Your coaching wasn't good enough. Your defense wasn't good enough. Your secondary wasn't good enough. Your pass rush wasn't good enough, aside from Cam Wake, aside from Brent Grimes in the secondary, and Rashad Jones. Look, I always said you were closer to building an elite defense back in the teens when you had Brent Grimes and Rashad Jones and Cam Wake than you were to building an elite offense. The Ryan Tannehill, Mike Wallace, Brian Hartline trio wasn't going to get you as far as that defensive trio would have.
Okay, fair.
So it's not going to be. Interior offensive line is important, but let's keep it in perspective.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. To me, it's like the interior offensive line generally very rarely will cost you a game, but if it's performing poorly, it prevents the offense from being nearly as good as it could be. That's apples. I mean, I don't know if we're splitting hairs over here. So practice on Saturday, the Dolphins did practice at their facility. They had to scrap the practice at Hard Rock Stadium in front of the fans because of the nasty weather forecast. And the two guys who jumped out to me, and by the way, big kudos to Mr. Perkins. Kudos to I'm going to pat myself on the back because yesterday on the podcast, the first player I mentioned is having a really good practice was Jalen Ramsey. And then today when Mike McDaniel was speaking, I don't remember exactly the question, he challenged us in the media going, who do you guys think got the orange jersey? And Perk chimed up very quickly with Jalen Ramsey. So props to both of us.
Yes, both of us. Yes.
Today, to me, the guys, Mo Camara, I thought was all over the place. I thought Emmanuel Agba also had a really good practice. Those are the two guys I'm going to go check my practice report here that I wrote for the website quickly. But off the top of my head, those two really jumped. I did not like what I saw, and it's one practice. But if we're doing a practice report, we have to good and bad. I did not like what I saw of the way Devon Achane was catching the ball. It looked to me like he was fighting it. And that's, and the idea of fighting a pass is there are guys like it seems like there's magnets in the hands and the ball gets there and it's like immediately it gets smothered very quickly and very smoothly. And with Devon today was the opposite. Was it just a one-day thing? Again, it's only one practice, but I'm not doing my job if I don't bring it up. Neither of the three quarterbacks really stood out. The best throw of the day to me was a Skylar Thompson float over the middle, over the linebacker to Jonnu Smith down the middle of the field. I thought that was a really pretty throw. Nothing else overwhelming from my end. You?
I wrote today about Chop Robinson and Devon Achane as being the guys who could bring instant glory to the past three drafts. And, to this draft, let's give it a chance. Patrick Paul and all those guys, they haven't done anything yet. But Achane, Achane, to me, it looks like they're trying to get him more involved in the passing game. Last year, I just wrote this today, 27 receptions for 195 yards, I want to say. Something like that. It wasn't a whole lot. But it looks like there is a clear kind of mission to expand his game in that way. We'll see how that works out. Chop Robinson continues to improve and impress. He was talking today about setting the edge, and I thought one quote that he said was, before I can get to the quarterback, I have to learn how to set the edge. And I thought that was very insightful because if you want to be a three-down player as opposed to just a pass rushing specialist, you've got to realize the importance of setting the edge, which is turning that run play back to the inside where the pursuit is. I gave Skylar Thompson my stock up today. And like you said, he wasn't that great, but I think the race for the number 2 quarterback, I think there's a race there. I do. I think that Mike White is ahead, but I do think that the gap is closing. I gave my stock down to Jody Fortson Jr. because the more I see Julian Hill and Durham Smythe and Jonnu Smith, I'm just thinking, wow, I just don't know if there's room for Jody Fortson. So it's not anything bad that he's done in camp. It's he hasn't done enough good in camp.
Okay, and I was adding my notes over here. A couple of other things here. A couple of other guys I had. You mentioned Chop Robinson. I had a written down here, and this in my practice report. There was a play where there was a pitch outside, and Robinson completely went outside, got the edge, forced. It was a chance to cut inside into traffic. So good work right there. Calais Campbell had a couple of really nice plays. Yeah. And here's the name. He's talking about recent drafts that we don't necessarily hear too often, and we criticized at times. Channing Tindall had a couple of nice plays. He had a quote-unquote would-be sack. Remember, they stop the play when the player, or they don't stop the play. So the pass rushers stop when they get close to the quarterback to not hit them. He had one of those. He also had a really good play on a swing pass to Jalen Wright, where he immediately was on top of him in the backfield. So those were couple of good plays. The attendance report, because we're doing our bookkeeping here. Those who did not work, Savannah Ahmed, Eric Ezukama again. We should mention Mike McDaniel said it's not related to the neck injury that kept him on IR most of the 2023 season, and that he should be back at some point. Didn't really offer a timetable. River Craycraft was out. Tyreek did not work. I guess between the top 100 and signing the restructured contract, he had other things on his mind. I don't know. I'm joking. Teron Armstead didn't work. Jordan Poyer, now that's 3 practices in a row. He's not been out there. Not quite sure what that's about. Jordan Brooks, again, wasn't out there. Same for linebacker Anthony Walker Jr. And the other one was cornerback Cam Smith. So,
do you have a problem with all the veteran days of rest? I don't. I'll go first here, Poop. I don't.
I decide who goes first. You go first.
It is. I get the feeling that this is something that's spreading around the league, especially with the veteran players, to take the plays off of their legs in training camp. The joint practices are where they get all of their work. So the way that I've chosen to look at this, Poop, is like with the lack of tackling to the ground during the season, and it's all relative, right? It's not like New England and Buffalo are playing their veteran players all the way through, and when they face the Dolphins in September, their veterans are going to be way ahead. I think everybody is taking the same strategy around the league, basically, so it's all relative. If the Dolphins can't tackle in September, neither will be able, Buffalo and Jacksonville and Green Bay. It's all relative. So that's how I'm choosing to look at the player rest thing. I don't know for a fact that everybody is doing the same thing with their 30-somethings, but with salaries going up and research into rest and recovery improving, I suspect that everybody is kind of doing the same thing.
I would think way more teams than that are doing it. I did talk to my buddy who covers the Lions, and he told me that does not happen with the Detroit Lions, which is not overly surprising considering their head coach, Dan Campbell, former Dolphin interim head coach, is a Bill Parcells disciple, and I don't think Bill Parcells would have any of that if he were still coaching in the NFL. So personally, no, I don't have a major issue with it. Again, so much of injuries, like the idea is you want to maximize your chances of having a team healthy at the end of the year, but a lot of it depends on luck, and no matter what you do to try to prevent it, if you get a run of bad luck, you're going to get a run of bad luck. And then you just have to hope that eventually the odds catch up to you where it's not always your turn to have bad luck. And who knows, maybe this is one of those years where the Dolphins don't have that kind of bad luck. But I don't have necessarily a major issue with it. I don't think Teron Armstead practicing very sporadically is really going to make him ineffective once September 8th rolls around. So we're about to wrap it up. Any final thoughts, words, Perk?
No, well, the Dolphins didn't have the fans out there today out of an abundance of caution. There was no lightning, there was no rain, but I think the lightning was the big deal, that you don't want all those people out there. So sorry, fans, you missed out, but it was out of care for you, out of caution for your safety.
Absolutely, and don't think it was a decision that was made lightly. And obviously the Dolphins are privy to the best information possible. weather forecasts, you know, it's always very finicky. You just don't know. What's the joke? You want to know what the weather forecast is? Go out and go outside. I mean, you just don't know. Then it's not a forecast. So on that note, we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to do my due diligence here. Please like, subscribe, share. Thanks for watching, and we will be back at it tomorrow, Sunday, August 4th, even though the Dolphins will not be practicing. Thanks for watching, and until we meet again.